He walked into the hospital expecting a normal checkup, but when the doctor walked in, it was her, the woman he hurt and never stopped loving. Now fate just gave him a second chance. But will she ever forgive him? The Billionaire's Second Chance. A story of love, loss, and making things right that will warm your heart. The soft sound of city traffic drifted quietly through the dark glass windows of Blake Tower, a shiny building of steel and big dreams poking into the New York sky. Inside, Desmond Blake sat in his office, fingers pressed against his head as the room kept going blurry. He had been in meetings back-to-back since morning, barely touching his coffee when the dizziness came. He laughed it off at first. Billionaires didn't faint, they kept going. But when his assistant found him slumped over the meeting table, pale and confused, even Desmond had to admit something was wrong. Now, hours later, he stood in the lobby of the Lexington Heart Institute, jacket in hand, jaw tight. He hated hospitals. The smell of cleaning solution and the quiet beeping sounds made him uncomfortable. The only reason he was here at all was because his company's health partner insisted and said they would tell the news reporters if he refused. Medical checkup after he collapsed. Mr. Blake, a nurse called from the doorway. Your doctor will see you now. He stood up, nodding shortly, trying not to show the tiredness that pulled at the corners of his mouth. The nurse led him down a quiet hallway lined with silver nameplates and framed medical certificates. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Work could wait 5 minutes. When he stepped into the exam room, he heard the sound of a pen tapping against a clipboard. Good afternoon. Mr. Blake, I'm Dr. Carter. Thank you for... Her voice stopped. Desmond froze. The clipboard almost slipped from her hand before she caught it. The world seemed to tilt, sound draining out of the room until all that was left was the rhythm of his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Josephine, his voice came out rough. Not believing. She blinked once quickly, pulling herself together. It's Dr. Carter now, she said calmly, pointing for him to sit. Please have a seat. We'll begin the exam. He obeyed, moving as if in a dream. The last time he'd seen her, she'd been standing in the rain outside his apartment, eyes red, voice shaking as she'd told him goodbye. That was 6 years ago. Now she stood before him, calm, confident, wearing a clean white coat over navy scrubs. Her soft brown skin glowed under the bright lights, and her curls were pulled back neatly. Only her eyes gave her away, deep brown, full of feelings she couldn't quite hide. Desmond forced a smile. I didn't expect her this. I'm sure neither of us did, she replied coolly, checking his chart. Let's keep this professional, shall we? He nodded, though his mind was already spinning through memories. College nights, coffee in tiny paper cups, her laughter spilling across the campus library as he whispered business ideas. The moment he told her he couldn't be tied down, that love was a distraction. He'd thought he was protecting his future. Instead, he'd destroyed his present. Josephine clipped a small monitor to his finger, avoiding his eyes. I'll be checking your heart rate and blood pressure. You've been under a lot of stress. You could say that, he said quietly. Running a multi-billion-dollar company tends to keep one busy. Her lips twitched just a little. I imagine so. The tension was unbearable. Her touch was professional, exact, but every time her fingers brushed his skin, a shock ran through him. His heart rate jumped on the monitor. She noticed. Try to relax, Mr. Blake, she said quietly. You're making the machine work too hard. He chuckled, low and strained. Maybe it's just the doctor. Her eyes lifted to his, sharp and unreadable. This is a medical appointment, Desmond. Don't make it something it isn't. The use of his first name hit him harder than it should have. He studied her face, the same features he'd memorized once upon a time, now sharpened by years of experience and something else. Distance. You look happy, he said finally. Different but happy. I am, she said simply, checking the monitor. Now take a deep breath. He did as told, though his chest felt tight. The exam continued in silence, the beeping monitor the only sound. Finally, Josephine removed the clip and wrote a note. You've been pushing yourself too hard, she said. Your stress levels are high, and your blood pressure isn't good. I'll need to review your test results before I can give you my full answer. Translation? He asked. She met his eyes directly this time. Translation, slow down or your body will do it for you. He smirked faintly. You always did have a way with words. Her expression softened for just a tiny second, and then she was all business again. That'll be all for today. My assistant will schedule a follow-up. She turned toward the door, but he stopped her. "Josephine, wait." She paused, her hand on the handle. "6 years," he said quietly, "and I never got to say I'm sorry." Her shoulders stiffened. "It's ancient history." "Not for me," she didn't answer. With one steady breath, she opened the door and stepped out, her heels clicking down the hall. Desmond sat there long after she left, the room suddenly too small, too clean, too full of ghosts. He had faced business wars, scandals, and betrayal, but nothing rattled him like those 5 minutes with Josephine Carter. Later that evening, he stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, staring out at the city that had given him everything and taken even more. His reflection in the glass looked strange, the powerful billionaire with dark circles under his eyes, holding a glass of water like it might steady him. Her face wouldn't leave his mind. He had built empires, crossed oceans, and surrounded himself with power, all to escape the pain of losing her. But now fate had thrown her back into his life, wearing a white coat and having the power to see through his armor. His phone buzzed on the counter. He ignored it again. When he finally looked at the screen, it wasn't a message from an investor or an assistant. It was from the hospital. "Urgent, test results available. Please contact Dr. Josephine Carter immediately." Desmond's heartbeat quickened. "Urgent? What did that mean?" He pressed call. The line rang once before going to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. He was halfway to grabbing his keys when his phone rang. "Mr. Blake." The nurse's voice was calm but firm. "Dr. Carter reviewed your results. She's requesting you come in first thing tomorrow morning. She'll explain everything in person." Desmond's throat went dry. "Is it serious?" "I'm afraid she'll need to discuss that with you directly." The line went dead. Desmond stood frozen in the silence of his penthouse, heart pounding so hard it hurt. He sank into the nearest chair, a chill crawling through his body. For the first time in years, Desmond Blake, the man who thought he controlled everything, realized he might have just lost control of the one thing he never could afford to lose, his heart. And the only person who could save it was the woman he'd already broken. The next morning, rain streaked the windows of the Lexington Heart Institute, blurring the city beyond. Desmond arrived early, his usual calm replaced by worry. For a man who had built a worldwide empire, he'd never felt so powerless. Josephine's assistant led him to her private office. The space was quiet, warm, bookshelves lined with medical journals, a single orchid on the desk and sunlight filtering through soft curtains. It smelled faintly of lavender and clean linen, so unmistakably her that he felt it like a physical ache. When she entered, he stood up automatically. She didn't smile. "Mr. Blake," she said, setting a file on her desk. "Please sit," he obeyed. His palms were sweaty. She opened the folder and spoke evenly. "I've reviewed your tests. You're not in immediate danger, but there are warning signs. Your stress levels are very high, and you're showing early signs of chronic strain, no sleep, dehydration, irregular heartbeat. You need to rest, eat, and disconnect." Desmond breathed out, tension easing slightly. "So I'm not dying?" "Not yet," she said, raising an eyebrow. "But if you keep living like this, you might as well be." He chuckled softly. "Guess you really did break my heart, Doctor." The corner of her mouth lifted, but only for a second. "I'm your doctor now, Desmond. Let's not mix that with the past. I wasn't joking." Her pen stopped against the paper. "Don't." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You think I don't remember? That I just walked away without feeling anything?" Her eyes flicked up sharp. "You didn't walk away, Desmond. You ran. You decided your company, your dream, your pride were all more important than what we had." "I was terrified," he said quietly, "of failing, of losing everything before it began. You wanted stability. I could barely afford rent. I thought if I could make it first, then—" "You can't rebuild what you destroy and walk away from," she cut in, voice shaking beneath its calm. Silence filled the room. Rain tapped softly against the window. Desmond looked down, guilt heavy in his chest. "You're right. I was an idiot. I told myself I was protecting you, but truth is, I was protecting my pride." Josephine's tone softened, though her guard stayed high. "I almost left medicine after you left me. I couldn't focus, couldn't breathe. But helping others, that became the only way to heal myself. You taught me what not to give up on." He met her eyes, full of regret and admiration. "I didn't deserve you then. I don't know if I do now." She sighed, closing his file. You need to manage your stress, Desmond. That's my medical advice. Before he could answer, a wave of dizziness washed over him. His vision blurred and he grabbed the edge of the desk. Josephine's professional mask dropped instantly. Desmond! She hurried to his side, supporting his shoulder. Breathe slowly. He obeyed, closing his eyes until the room steadied again. I'm fine, he muttered. You're not fine, she said sharply. You're exhausted. Her hand stayed on his arm a moment longer than necessary. Neither moved. The pulse under his skin beat wildly, not from fear, but from how close she was. When he finally looked up, their faces were inches apart. Guess I still make your heart race, he said quietly. She stepped back, flustered. You need to rest. I'll watch you for a few minutes before you go. He smiled faintly. You always did take care of me, even when I didn't deserve it. She didn't reply, busying herself with the monitor, but the shake in her hand gave her away. The silence between them was thick, filled with unspoken memories. Their first kiss in a rainstorm, late-night study sessions, whispered dreams of the future. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. Why now, Desmond? Why come back into my life like this? He met her gaze. I didn't plan this, but maybe fate decided we needed another chance. Her expression flickered, part longing, part disbelief. Oh, you don't get to say that. Maybe not, but I mean it. I never stopped, don't. She cut him off, standing quickly. You're my patient, that's all. He nodded slowly, though his eyes told her he didn't believe it. After a few quiet moments, she cleared her throat. You can go now. I'll have my assistant schedule a follow-up appointment in a few days. He stood up, adjusting his jacket. I'll be here. Then thank you, Doctor. She turned away, trying to hide the emotion that shimmered in her eyes. Just doing my job. Desmond hesitated, then reached into his pocket and slid a card across her desk. If you ever need anything at all, call me. Her lips pressed into a tight line. Goodbye, Mr. Blake. He left without another word, but as the door clicked shut, Josephine pressed a trembling hand to her chest, trying to steady the storm inside. Later that evening, Desmond found himself standing before the mirror in his penthouse. He looked healthier than he felt. The conversation replayed endlessly in his mind, her voice, her anger, her eyes that still burned with something he couldn't name. He wasn't done. Not this time. That night he picked up the phone and called her office. Dinner, he said simply. As a thank you for saving me from myself. Her answer was short. That's not appropriate, Mr. Blake. It's not a date, he insisted. It's gratitude. 1 hour neutral ground. You pick the place. There was a pause, then softly, Fine, 1 hour. When she walked into the restaurant, every head turned. She was elegant and calm, wrapped in navy silk, her curls falling loosely around her face. Desmond stood as she approached, stunned despite himself. You're late, she said lightly. You still notice, he teased. Dinner began stiffly. Polite conversation about work, research, and travel. Slowly the tension eased. They laughed once, twice, and for a moment, it felt like the world had rewound to before everything fell apart. He was about to tell her about the sleepless nights, the regret, the truth that he'd never stopped loving her, when a voice interrupted. Well, this is unexpected. A tall blonde woman appeared beside their table, elegant and confident. Cameras flashed somewhere behind her, the telltale light of photographers. Desmond, she purred, touching his shoulder. Oh, you didn't tell me we were having company. Josephine froze. The woman turned to her with a perfect smile. I'm Cassandra, Desmond's fiancée. The words hit like a slap. Josephine's breath caught, her entire body going stiff. Fiancée, she whispered. Desmond shot up, panic flashing across his face. Cassandra, this isn't... But Josephine was already on her feet, voice shaking. You really haven't changed, have you? Josephine, wait, please, cameras clicked. People turned. She grabbed her coat and walked out without another word. By the time Desmond made it outside, she was gone, swallowed by the rain-soaked streets of New York. He stood under the streetlight, soaked, surrounded by the echo of his own mistakes, wondering how he could lose her twice in one lifetime. The city hadn't slept, and neither had he. Rain poured against Desmond's penthouse windows, blurring the skyline he used to love, the one that once made him feel invincible. Now it only made him feel small. Headlines splashed across every news feed. Billionaire's secret dinner scandal, and tech mogul's mysterious fiancée sparks drama. Each time he saw Josephine's face in those photos, Walking out of that restaurant, hurt written across her eyes, it was like a knife to the chest. He'd called her office every day, no answer. He'd sent flowers, messages, even an apology letter written by hand, something he hadn't done in years. Still nothing. For a man who could buy silence, control headlines and command empires, he couldn't win back the one thing he truly wanted. Her. By the fourth morning, his patience and his restraint snapped. He left a board meeting mid-sentence. Ignoring the shocked looks from his executives, "Cancel my day," he told his assistant. All of it. Then he grabbed his coat and stepped into the storm. By the time he reached the Lexington Heart Institute, he was soaked. Rain plastered his hair to his forehead, streaking across his face like tears. The shiny hospital lobby gleamed around him, white marble floors, quiet voices, the faint hum of machines. The receptionist blinked up at him, startled. "Mr. Blake, sir, you're soaked." I need to see Dr. Carter," he said roughly. "Please." "She's in surgery right now," the woman stammered. "Then I'll wait." He took a seat in the waiting area, ignoring the stairs. Water pooled at his feet, his soaked shirt clinging to his chest. He looked out of place here, a billionaire in a suit worth more than most cars, sitting like a lost soul in a hospital chair. 2 hours passed. He didn't move, didn't look at his phone, didn't even breathe normally. Every time footsteps echoed down the hall, his head snapped up until finally, she appeared. Josephine walked toward the reception desk, her surgical cap tucked into her pocket, her curls slightly damp with humidity. She looked exhausted and beautiful. When she saw him, she froze. "Desmond?" He stood up instantly. "I need to talk to you." Her eyes narrowed, equal parts disbelief and irritation. "So you can't just show up here. I can't lose you again," he said quietly. "It's not like this." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The rain still dripped from his coat, his clothes clinging to his body. But his eyes, those blue-gray eyes she once fell in love with, burned with honesty. 5 minutes, he pleaded. "That's all I'm asking," Josephine sighed, scanning the hallway to make sure no one was watching. "Fine, 5 minutes." "My office." Her office was smaller than he expected, warm, lined with medical books and framed certificates. There was a scent of coffee and lavender, familiar in a way that twisted his chest. She pointed toward a chair but didn't sit. "Say what you came to say." Desmond stayed standing, hands shoved into his wet pockets. "That woman, Cassandra, she's not my fiancée." Josephine let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, really?" "Because every tabloid in New York seems to disagree. She's the daughter of one of my company's first investors," he said quickly. "Years ago, her father tried to push a merger through. The rumor of an engagement got around, and I didn't bother to deny it. I didn't care enough then," his voice cracked. "But I should have cared when it started hurting you." Josephine's expression faltered, her arms still crossed. "I let people believe a lie because it was convenient." He nodded once. "I did. I thought none of it mattered, until I saw what it cost me. Desmond, you don't get to rewrite history just because you're sorry now." "I'm not trying to rewrite it," he said softly. "I'm trying to finally tell the truth." Her chest rose and fell as she tried to stay calm. "Why now? Why come here and do this?" He took a slow step toward her. "Because when I saw you again, something inside me changed. I've spent years building an empire, and it's empty. All of it. You're the only person who ever saw me for who I was, before the money, before the fame." She swallowed, but her voice was steady. "You hurt me, Desmond. You walked away and left me to pick up the pieces. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" "Yes," he whispered, "because it's been killing me ever since." He ran a hand through his hair, his voice rough. "My body's been giving up on me. I can't sleep. I can't breathe without thinking about you. You told me once that hearts remember what the mind forgets." She froze, eyes wide. "You remember that?" "Every word," he said. "And I think mine's been remembering you for 6 years." Her calm broke just slightly, a shake in her lips, a flicker in her eyes. "You can't just walk back into my life and expect me to believe you've changed." He smiled sadly. "You're right. That's why I didn't come with words this time." From his coat pocket, he pulled a waterproof envelope, placing it gently on her desk. She frowned. "What's this?" "An endowment," he said quietly. "A full cardiac wing here at Lexington. Research labs, recovery units, scholarships for students who can't afford medical school. It's already approved." She blinked. "You're funding an entire hospital wing." "Not me," he corrected softly. It's going to be called the Carter Heart Center." Josephine stared at him, speechless. He continued before she could speak. "This isn't about guilt or charity. It's because you saved my life twice. Once when you treated me, and again when you reminded me who I was. You've always been the reason I wanted to do something that mattered." Tears welled in her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. "Desmond, he took a step closer. "It's the only way I know to show you that I mean what I'm saying." Her voice trembled. "You make it sound so easy to forgive." "It's not," he said softly. "But it's worth it." The silence that followed was thick and fragile. Outside, the rain softened to a light drizzle. Tapping rhythmically against the glass, Josephine turned away, pretending to fix the orchid on her windowsill. But her shoulders trembled. "You've changed," she said finally. "You really have." "I had to," he said. "You don't get a second chance with someone like you unless you earn it." When she turned back, tears shimmered on her lashes. She took a hesitant step toward him. "And if I can't promise anything right now, then I'll wait," he said simply. "As long as it takes." Something in his tone, quiet, certain, melted the last of her walls. Slowly, she reached for his hand. His fingers brushed hers. And in that small, simple touch, 6 years of distance vanished. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered. Desmond's breath caught. "Then don't stop now." He pulled her gently into his arms, and this time she didn't resist. Her cheek pressed against his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. The very sound she once thought she'd never hear again. "Seems your heart's doing fine," she murmured, smiling through her tears. He laughed softly, pressing his lips to her forehead. "It remembers who it beats for." 3 months later, the morning sun poured over the polished marble floors of the Carter Heart Center. Reporters and hospital staff filled the lobby, the air alive with applause and camera flashes. A huge ribbon stretched across the glass doors. The engraved sign gleamed proudly. The Carter Heart Center, dedicated to healing and hope. Desmond stood beside Josephine at the podium. He looked healthier now. No dark circles, no nervous energy, just calm. Josephine, radiant in a white suit, smiled as she spoke to the crowd. "This center isn't just a building," she said, her voice carrying warmth and grace. "It's a promise that every heart, no matter how broken, deserves a second chance." Desmond's gaze never left her. When the applause roared, he leaned close and whispered, "You've always been the heart of it all, Joe." She turned toward him, her eyes shining. "And you finally learned to listen to yours." As the ribbon fell and confetti burst into the air, he slipped his hand into hers. "You fixed more than my heart," he murmured. "You healed it," she smiled softly. "You just needed someone to remind you it was still beating." The crowd cheered as he drew her close, pressing a gentle kiss to her lips, not out of impulse, but conviction. Cameras flashed, but for once, Desmond Blake didn't care who saw. He wasn't the cold, unreachable billionaire anymore. He was a man reborn, grounded by love, humbled by loss, and finally whole again. Outside, the city skyline gleamed under the golden sun, the rain now only a memory. Josephine rested her head against his shoulder, her hand holding his. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we never met again?" she asked softly. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then my heart never would have learned how to live." She laughed quietly. "Always the dramatic one." He chuckled, his tone tender. "Maybe, but I finally have something worth being dramatic about." Their eyes met, steady, certain, and full of peace, and as the applause echoed around them, Desmond realized that after all the noise, the chaos, and the years apart, the only sound that truly mattered was this: two hearts beating together in perfect rhythm once again. 6 months later, spring had returned to New York, soft rain, blooming cherry trees, and sunlight that spilled like gold over the glass towers. Desmond stood on the rooftop garden of the Carter Heart Center, the same place they'd first unveiled the foundation together. The city glimmered below, but his eyes were fixed on the woman walking toward him, Josephine. She wore a flowing cream dress that caught the evening breeze, her curls brushing her shoulders, her smile gentle and knowing. The years between them had vanished. What remained was everything they had rebuilt: trust, love, and something even deeper. "Why did you ask me to come up here?" she asked, teasing. "You look nervous, Mr. Blake." He gave a soft, uneven laugh. "Maybe I am." She tilted her head, amused. "That's new." He took her hand. "You once said that healing isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about learning to live with what remains. Her eyes softened. I did, Desmond breathed out, his voice quiet but steady. Well, what remains of me is you. Before she could respond, he went down on one knee. The world around them stilled. The wind, the hum of the city, even the distant sirens, all fell silent as he opened the velvet box. Inside, a diamond glowed beneath the sunset, simple, timeless, breathtaking. Josephine Carter, he said, his voice shaking just slightly. You gave me back my heart. You showed me how to love, how to live, how to be more than a man who hides behind success. I don't ever want to go another day without you. Marry me. Her breath caught, her eyes filling with tears. Desmond, he looked up, smiling nervously. I mean, if you're still taking patients with chronic attachment issues. She laughed through her tears, the sound he'd missed most in the world, and knelt to meet him. I told you once that some hearts never forget, she whispered, her hands shaking as she cupped his face. Mine never stopped loving you, yes. Desmond, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and when she kissed him, deeply, fully, without hesitation, the city lights flickered to life behind them, like the universe itself had approved. 1 year later, the Blake estate in upstate New York was alive with music and laughter. Soft string lights wound through oak trees. Guests gathered beneath a canopy of ivory roses, their glasses shimmering in the golden afternoon light. Desmond stood at the altar, in a tailored navy suit, looking every bit the man he had become, not the cold billionaire the world once knew, but a husband waiting for his future. Then she appeared. Josephine walked down the aisle, radiant in white satin, her bouquet of pale orchids trembling slightly in her hands. Every step she took was slow, graceful, and when their eyes met, time folded in on itself. The ceremony was small, just family, close friends, and the people whose lives they had touched through the heart center. When she reached him, he whispered, "You're even more beautiful than I remembered." She smiled. "Good thing you finally came to your senses." They exchanged vows beneath a canopy of white roses, promises not of perfection, but of truth, forgiveness, and faith. "I promise to never run from love again," he said, "and I promise to never stop believing that hearts can heal," she replied. When he kissed her, the crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, confetti rained down, and for once, Desmond didn't care how many headlines would follow, because this time the story was real. 2 years later, the morning light filtered softly through the hospital window. Josephine sat on the edge of a hospital bed, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "Breathe," Desmond said, pacing beside her, trying not to panic. She glared playfully. "Desmond, if you tell me to breathe one more time." He raised his hands in surrender, though the corners of his mouth twitched. We're... She reached out, grabbed his wrist and squeezed. "We're fine. Now help me get through this last contraction before I change my mind about letting you in the delivery room." Hours passed in a blur. Nurses moving in and out, monitors beeping, rain tapping softly against the glass. And then at exactly 3:12 a.m., the sound of a baby's first cry filled the room. Desmond froze. His throat closed, his vision blurred. The doctor smiled and said, "Congratulations, Dr. Carter and Mr. Blake, it's a girl." Josephine's head fell back on the pillow, tears streaming down her cheeks as the nurse placed the tiny, wriggling bundle in her arms. Desmond approached slowly, as though afraid to breathe too loudly. When he saw the baby's face, warm brown skin, soft curls, tiny fingers curling around his thumb, his heart shattered open all over again. "She's perfect," he whispered. Josephine smiled weakly. "She has your eyes." He shook his head. "No, she has yours, the eyes of the woman who saved me twice." He bent down, pressing a kiss to both their foreheads. "Welcome to the world, little one," he murmured. "You have no idea how long we've waited for you." Later that morning, the room was quiet. The chaos faded. The rain had stopped, and sunlight glowed against the window pane. Josephine slept peacefully, the baby resting against her chest. Desmond sat beside the bed, watching them, his entire world bundled into that single frame. When Josephine stirred, she found him smiling softly. "What are you thinking?" she asked sleepily. He took her hand, his thumb tracing the new gold band on her finger. "I was just thinking about how every wrong turn, every heartbreak, every storm led us here." She smiled faintly. "You sound like one of my patients," he chuckled quietly. "Maybe I am. Just permanently admitted." she laughed, shifting slightly as the baby made a small noise. We still haven't picked her name. Desmond leaned closer, brushing his knuckles against the baby's tiny hand. How about Hope? Josephine looked down at the sleeping infant, then back at him. Hope Blake, she whispered, tasting the name. It's perfect, he smiled. Because that's what you gave me, Hope. She reached up, cupping his cheek. And you gave me home. They stayed that way for a long time, 3 heartbeats in perfect rhythm. A quiet miracle born from pain, forgiveness, and love. Outside, the city hummed awake. The skyline glowed with sunrise, bright, endless, alive. Desmond pressed a final kiss to Josephine's forehead and whispered, Looks like the heart remembers how to start over after all. She smiled, eyes still closed. No, she whispered back. It just remembers who it was beating for all along. Thank you so much for watching and supporting. Your love, comments, and shares mean everything to me. Grateful for each of you. Let's keep growing together with love from whispers of